In this video, we'll be considering the risk control aspects of our case studies. We begin again with the GLIMRIS study of aquatic nuisance species. We're looking at the GLIMRIS summary report, and this is page 6 of the report, where they begin to discuss aquatic nuisance species and control technologies. You'll notice here that they identify a number of technologies, and they tend to group the measures that are available for managing unacceptable A&S risks into categories of non-structural controls, which you see here, and some examples would be using nets to remove fish from a water body, using registered chemicals to control plants or animals, controlling boat access, education programs, and the like. There are also structural controls. The examples here begin with the GLIMRIS lock, and here is an example of a GLIMRIS lock. Basically, a vessel pulls into the lock, and after the vessel enters, the water is drained and replaced with A&S treated water. This prevents the spread of species during the operation of a lock. If we scroll on down, you'll see electronic barriers, the A&S treatment plant, screened sluice gates, and physical barriers are included as well. Physical barriers would be physically separating the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes. So the core document does an excellent job of identifying the alternative measures that are available for dealing with the aquatic nuisance species. They then take these measures and others not mentioned here, and they combine them to identify 8 alternative risk management options. One of these is do nothing, called the No New Federal Action Sustained Activities approach. That would mean the federal government would take new actions, but they would sustain those activities that are already underway. So if you read the report, they will give you background on the strategies they used in their alternative plans and a great deal of detail here. We're going to scroll on down to where they begin to describe plans. This is the do nothing plan, and so you'll see an alternative description there. If we continue, here's plan 2, which would be nothing but non-structural control technologies. There's a description there. Very descriptive and helpful tables. And let's see, we will scroll down to plan 4, control technology alternative with a buffer zone. You'll get an alternative description here. It will tell you what kinds of measures are being used. You'll see here the key structural elements along with the non-structural elements. And so down here is a map that shows you what the elements would be here. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers does an excellent job on this piece, the risk control, identifying the options that are available. We're now going to switch to the Vibrio risk assessment. Here we have in bold the questions that were asked of risk assessors. And the one that's relevant for risk control here is what reductions in risk can be anticipated with different potential intervention strategies. And if you were to read through this section of the report, you would find what risk control measures have been considered. If we begin here with the overall, the most influential factor predicted to affect risk of illness was the levels of total Vibrio parahemolyticus in oysters at the time of harvest. Intervention strategies should be aimed at reducing levels of Vibrio parahemolyticus and/or preventing its growth in oysters after the harvest. So if you read on, scrolling down, you'll see that the risk of Vibrio is considered substantial. And they outline post-harvest treatment. These would be measures aimed at reducing the levels of Vibrio parahemolyticus in oysters to reduce the predicted risk of illness associated with this pathogen. And there's a discussion of what those measures are. We continue down and see there would also be at harvest and at retail controls. Controlling the levels of Vibrio and oysters at harvest or at retail after refrigeration and storage drastically reduces the number of predicted illnesses, but would require diversion of oysters from the raw market or modification of handling practices to reduce post-harvest Vibrio parahemolyticus growth. So they provide information down here. We won't take the time to examine it, not at this point. But what I would like you to understand is in the risk control, this is where it's important to identify options. If you've had a chance to take a look at the Vibrio risk assessment, you see in that model an excellent example of how they examined heating, freezing, and rapid cooling as interventions for reducing illness. So this would give you a good example of how risk control discussions are considered in a risk analysis activity.